Hi guys, how's it going? In this video, I'm very sorry, but I'm the bearer of extremely worrying news that, like all such news, seems to have just escaped the glaze of the British public. Now, though I dislike the phrase "I told you so," never was there more an appropriate time to use such a phrase, as we've discussed in the past and you guys have referred to on many occasions in the comment sections, which, by the way, I cannot thank you enough for, okay? I have very, very disturbing news, and it's now an absolute certainty that as the catastrophic economic avalanche of Brexit continues to gather momentum, it is really just about to sweep away major elements of the City of London, as the terms of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement with regard to financial services has been stepped up substantially by the European Central Bank. So let's go. Now, I'm going to walk you through what's going on, but it's going to take a little bit of time. So our normal video streaming time is about 8.5 minutes. Guys, if you can hang on till the end, you'll learn quite a bit and you'll be able to get this out there. I won't be saying anything too bad. Now, what is more startling for me is how these events have been ignored by the UK's mainstream media. But let me give you a taste of what they are saying in London. And by they, I mean the people on the street, the real decision makers, and not some jumped up politician or journalist, okay? And here's how it goes. It's not stricter than the letter of what was agreed, but there was a perception that surely they can't mean that. Surely they'll see reason once we get underway, he said. Turns out they did mean that, and they are pretty good at enforcing it. Now, what they're enforcing is the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. Now, I think we can all agree that one of the big surprises of Brexit was how few jobs moved from the city to the EU, with the Financial Times research showing only a minimal reduction of London bank jobs in recent years against predictions that tens of thousands of jobs would have to relocate. Now, as we already examined why the Financial Times cannot take the approach of mainstream media, as it depends heavily on subscriptions from its readership, both online and in print, I think we can take it that what they are reporting from ground zero is relatively dead balls accurate. Because if they don't report stuff accurately, they're going to go out of business, okay? You see, the European Central Bank are not a bunch of unelected bureaucrats. They are a mean bunch of economists that have a single goal in mind, and that is to protect the EU economy against all adversaries at all costs. And I use the word adversaries deliberately simply because the European Central Bank, just like the Bank of England, separates people into three basic groups, okay? And they are: one, you are either in the group that supports their efforts and strategies and are considered friendly, or two, you're in a group that is against their strategy and efforts, in which case you are considered the enemy. And finally, you have group three. You do not have an opinion either way, and assuming you have little influence to affect strategies or policies, they don't really give a toss one way or the other, what you do or what you say. So that's just the way life is, which brings us to what is happening on the streets of London today. The European Central Bank have woken up from the pandemic slumber, and it had already given the banks, lawyers, etc., leeway to get through the pandemic, but they did let things be, but only so that they could move on the service industry when the time was right. And oh boy, is the time right now. You see, the EU is kind of split at the moment. On the one hand, you have Šefčovič doing his level best to sort out the protocol issues. Apologies for the dog barking, by the way. But on the other hand, we have the UK facing worsening economic news, which is being deliberately depressing, the government is deliberately depressing the inflation figures in order to limit the exposure that the Bank of England now finds herself in at the moment. You see, as the Bank of England was issuing all those 5 and 10-year bonds to get money back circulating, they had to ensure that they were index linked. So, as inflation rises, so too does their repayment amounts, and therefore it provides protection to the bond holders, whoever they may be, and who they may then continue to support any further bond issues. If, however, you burn those bondholders, that well, as we would know it, will be truly dry, and the next time cash is required, and therefore the Bank of England will be screwed because they're going to have to borrow at much higher rates. Okay? Anyway, almost immediately after the Trade and Cooperation Agreement was signed, 3 distinctive things happened. 1 was the pandemic. 2 was the immediate exodus of almost all EU CDOs, credit default options. And 3rd was the exit of 10% of the UK's liquidity, namely £1.2 trillion to far-flung places around the globe, from Hong Kong to New York and pretty much everywhere in between. But when the lockdown occurred throughout the world, it considerably reduced activity other than in the bond markets, where companies were raising money because A, the money was cheap, and B, the banks were looking for a way to make money, and London was front and centre of this activity. The ECB, however, were in effect envious, but well and truly handcuffed. There was nothing they could do. So they chose to let things slide and simply issued reminders to those in the service industry about the TCA that they needed to prepare for what the possible dropping of the equivalents currently enjoyed by the UK at the time. Okay? But then the alarm bells started to ring. And it started with A. It was clear that London could not now, nor in the future, depend completely on equivalents. That was not a given. In fact, it was almost, you're not going to get it. B, the UK did not get the much needed accession to the Lugano Convention. And C, there is now zero level of trust and an air of an antagonism between the EU and the UK. And D, the nail in the coffin, was the lifting of the pandemic restrictions in the UK. Okay? You see, no sooner had the UK lifted the restrictions and claimed that all was great in the land of milk and honey, but the European Central Bank had been handed the golden opportunity to force the industry to comply with the terms of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. Okay? You see, they had ineffectively allowed it to slide during the pandemic, as firms claimed legitimately that they couldn't really focus on such administrative items, etc. You know, so let's hear exactly what the experts on the ground are saying today, okay? This is today now. Bank executives, lawyers and supervisors all told the Financial Times that the ECB is becoming increasingly forceful in its demands that lenders move more resources to the continent to run their European business in the aftermath of Brexit. Not asking, demanding, okay? The demand affects banks from across the world who have traditionally used London as their hub to provide key services to clients in the EU. This fresh push is partly linked to the European Central Bank's recent decision to end temporary pandemic era reprieves it granted banks on their timetable for moving. Okay? Now, that was moving their staff and capital to the EU. One person quite familiar with the change said the ECB had been realistic in light of the impediments to geographic moves and granted extensions. But now that is over. Disparities in different banks' approaches and shortcomings in some have been already highlighted by an continuing what they called desk mapping review of the beefed up continental offices that banks are using to serve their EU clients after Brexit. And what they mean by desk mapping is they want to know where the people are. So they basically want a map of where the people are that are doing the certain jobs. Okay? Bankers and lawyers also said that the ECB was taking a much tougher approach than expected to the long-standing issue of the location of risk management staff overseeing those EU trades and how much capital, especially the EU entities, must have. So if you're doing lots of trade on a bank, on a product from the EU, and you're doing it from London, they want that capital, that security in the EU, not in London, okay? One executive said his bank would have to move hundreds more people than they expected because of the approach the ECB is taking to back-to-back models, which previously allowed banks to offset their EU trades with their London entities and effectively manage the risk from the UK. Guys, what this means is that all of those stories we were told about the City of London, they're going to start happening now. And there's no way to stop it, because as we also learned and studied in other videos, the City of London were thrown under the Brexit bus and nobody gave a toss about that in the TCA. But those economists, those unelected bureaucrats, they were doing their job, and they're doing it right now, and it's not looking good. See you on the flip side, guys. Take care. Don't forget to subscribe and all of that. Hope you enjoy the video. Take care. Bye-bye.